Is this pretty common, Alex? The candidates challenging each other's signatures?
It is. This is just another stage of any Chicago election. We saw it during the lead up to the primary this past year too, and it really, in a lot of ways, is a test of campaigns' internal organizing strength and infrastructure. Can they survive this first stage where they are, it's not very public facing at all, as much as we journalists try to get down into the pedway and figure out what's going on. Just send their lawyers in there and make these sort of obscure legal arguments about this signature counts, this doesn't. It weeded out a few candidates, including Jamal Green in the 2019 election. He dropped out of the race, as if I recall correctly, when it sort of became clear he was not going to make the ballot. And so I think we can probably expect a couple of candidates, not just at the mayoral level, but importantly also in those 50 aldermanic races, to get popped off the ballot.
Heather, could this end up narrowing the field of black candidates for mayor?
We could. Both Green and Sawyer are black, and they are facing challenges, as is Frederick Collins. So that's three candidates that could find themselves out of luck because of this storied, hallowed tradition. And I think that there will be some candidates who will breathe a sigh of relief, because it has long, races for mayor in Chicago has long been defined by race. And there's a sense that if you split the black vote, that could make it harder for a black candidate to win or make it into the runoff, which is set for April 4th, if no candidate gets more than 50% of the vote. I don't know if that applies as much this year as it has in years past, but that is certainly part of the strategy involved here, and why Willie Wilson is challenging Alderman Sawyer's petitions.
Yeah.
They both have their base of voters on the South Side, so it's a zero-sum game. Those people are either going to vote for Wilson or they're going to vote for Sawyer in some cases, and Willie Wilson wants to make sure that he is the candidate left standing.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Sasha, I'll just add, some of this stuff is it's not high-minded. There's long simmering disputes between candidates. Alex mentioned that Jamal Green, got basically pushed off last time.
Yeah.
So there's dispute that he's still mad about. There's Ricky Hendon, a former state senator, who's gotten his hand in here.
So you kind of expected some of this?
Right. I think it's just to remind people that this is not a high-minded exercise about ensuring people's voices are heard. This is sometimes about settling old political scores.
It can get very personal, and it's very tactical.
Yeah, well, Alex, Kate mentions Ricky Hendon, State Senator Ricky Hendon. Tell us what's going on there, because this is one of the more publicized conflicts in the petition signature spat.
Yeah, they have a sort of long-running bad blood, I guess you could say. We heard about it from Claire just at the top of the hour here. The latest in this is that Green released a cell phone video of what he purports to be Ricky Hendon, who's he's a senior advisor to the Willie Wilson campaign, supposedly telling a worker for Green's campaign, "Hey, if you withdraw your challenge against Wilson's signatures, I'll take care of you." Basically, saying that it's a bribe. This is, to this point, unverified. It's a little bit hard to confirm the voice, but what I think is really telling is that Willie Wilson's response to this was not to deny it, but to instead distance himself from Hendon and say, well, I don't really know anything about what that guy does. And also, as we also heard, Hendon has not denied it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of spots on the ballot, we know now which mayoral candidate's going to have the top spot. Who is it, Heather? And how important is that?
Well, it is Jamal Green. So if he stays on the ballot, he will have that first slot. And there's a school of thought out there that people who come to vote with maybe less information than other voters will be more inclined to choose the first person they see or the last person they see. So if Jamal Green makes it onto the ballot, he stands to benefit from that. But if he gets kicked off, the first spot will go to Alderman Sophia King. And the last spot is assured for U.S. Rep. Jesus Chuy Garcia, who was the only candidate to file at the deadline of 5 p.m. on November 28th. So in the middle, all jumbled up in there, will be Lori Lightfoot, Brandon Johnson, all of the other candidates, and their supporters will have to sort of look down that, relatively lengthy list of candidates to find the one that they want to vote for and fill in that bubble, which, some people say, you want to make it easier on your voters, and that first slot could potentially do that.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and we are going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Alex Nitkin, reporter for the Better Government Association, WTTW's Chicago politics reporter Heather Cherone, and Kate Grossman, senior education editor for WBEZ. All right, turning to you, Kate. We've got a couple of Chicago public schools related stories to take a look at. First one, a Bronzeville teacher and another administrator, they were removed by CPS this week. What do we know?
So this is at Dunbar Career Academy. The principal and a
principal, not teacher.
Yeah. So the principal and a dean of culture were removed very abruptly last week. This is rare, not unheard of, but on occasion, CPS out of the blue will remove a principal, pending an investigation. We've already seen it once. It happened at Jones College Prep earlier this year. But it's highly disruptive, of course, especially for Dunbar is a small school, so everybody probably knows the principal and the dean of culture. It's a school that's struggling with low enrollment and has lost a lot of its programming. So this is certainly a blow for the school. And there's also just a lot of upset at the school because the CPS won't say what the investigation relates to, including the local school council. They oversee the budget. They hire the principal. They're in charge of renewing the principal's contract.
Yeah.
They say they don't, as of a couple of days ago, they have no idea. So it's highly disruptive and,
Those are
really
important positions to go without. So
suddenly.
And
and CPS always puts it, they have a pool of retired or sort of consultant principals.
I see.
But of course, it's not the same.
Yeah. A lawsuit as well. This is against the Chicago Public Schools by an ex-principal at Lincoln Park High School. That's been making headlines. So but before we get into the lawsuit, can you just give us the backstory here?
Sure. So in 2020, early in the year, the principal and the assistant principal were also abruptly fired, although there was no secret or there was not shrouded in mystery there. Basically, there was a basketball trip. There was some sexual misconduct on the trip. There was a whistleblower that said it was a student retaliated against. And CPS said that the principal and the assistant principal, who have an obligation to report, alleged wrongdoing,
right.
There's a whole protocol. CPS said they bungled the whole thing and they didn't protect the whistleblower and they didn't follow all the protocols. And
this was sexual misconduct involving an adult?
No, student to students.
Okay.
Between students. Although there was other things came out related to the athletics program, which I don't want to speak out of school because it's been a couple of years. I don't remember actually all the details, but the primary incident involved student to student.
Okay.
So no misconduct, sexual misconduct alleged by the principal and AP, just to be clear. Mm-hmm. It was about their handling of the allegations.
Gotcha.
So they were just yanked, literally within a matter of days. And, the school community really loved them and were very upset. And CPS stood by it. And so one of the principal, actually both the principal and the AP sued, but it looks like only the principal's civil suit continued. But it's in court this week. That's why it's back in the news.
I see.
And he is saying they ruined his career. He cannot work in education. He said his kid goes to CPS. He can't even coach his kid's volleyball team because he's on a do not enter any school list.
Goodness.
And he can't make a living. And so it's a very, the details matter, of course, but what I think is most interesting about this story is CPS's response and who gets hurt. Yeah. Right. CPS says, we're about the kids, not the adults, which makes a lot of sense. But there's been a really hard pendulum swing. Mm-hmm. The Tribune did an investigation a couple of years ago, actually right before this firing took place, where they found that CPS, there were all these kids who'd been abused and CPS wasn't protecting them. And so CPS sprung into action. They set up all these systems. And actually, this was one of the first cases, and they just like came down with a hammer.
Wow.
And there, this is a big high profile case, but we've heard of other cases, much quieter ones, a teacher, an administrator who is being investigated, put on leave. They feel like their lives have been ruined. And these cases tend to go on for a really, really long time, and they're in limbo. And so there are these questions, I think important questions being raised about, of course, kids come first and you got to protect kids, but has CPS potentially swung too hard in the opposite direction?
Yeah. Wow. And speaking of departures, another one here, Vice President of the Chicago Board of Education, Sendil Revoluri, announced after 3 years he's leaving. Why?
Well, I don't think there's anything unusual about it. It was a surprise because he just announced it without, previewing it, basically. Yeah. But he's been on since 2019. He was one of the Mayor Lori Lightfoot's original members of the board. There's actually now only 2 left. So which means all the other ones have already left. He's the 4th person to announce just this calendar year that they're leaving. So it's not a big surprise. I don't think there's anything untoward in his announcement. He's well regarded. But it does. I think the timing suggests that we got a mayoral election coming up. We have a pending transition to an elected school board. I'm speculating here. He might be like, I've done my service.
Yeah.
It's time for me to move on to other things. That's a lot for anyone to. For sure. That's a tall task for those board members.
All right, let's turn to something very different. News involving inflatable holiday decorations and an Irish pub.
Oh, nice.
Heather, you wouldn't think this could involve politics, but, it's Chicago. No surprises there.
I was just going to say, of course it's political. It's
an
Chicago.
Irish pub and inflatable holiday decorations. Do tell.
So there is a bar, and they celebrate the holidays by putting up giant inflatables like the ones you see in my suburban neighborhood of the Grinch and the snowman and that sort of thing. The issue is that those are not allowed in places where it can obstruct the view of pedestrians or drivers. So it appears as if Alderman LaSpada, who is running for re-election, got a complaint about it and forwarded that to the Department of Transportation, which asked the bar to take down the inflatables. Now, the owners of the bar hosted events for 2 of his opponents, including former Alderman Proco Joe Moreno, and they have told various and assorted media organizations that they believe that this order was political retaliation and had nothing to do with the fact that these inflatables posed a risk to people using Chicago's streets and sidewalks. But
I see.
This is very, very, very common in an election season where everything sort of starts to seem political, but it would, of course, be a dereliction of duty by any elected official to take action against a private business because they supported somebody else but the current office holder. And I'm sure nothing like that has ever happened in Chicago, but I've yet to see any definitive answers in this case.
And for those who are curious, we're talking about the Irish Nobleman Pub on West Erie in a Westtown neighborhood. All right, switching gears, Alex, a former Chicago detective is suing the city and CPD. What's he alleging?
That's right. Isaac Lambert, Isaac Lambert was a police detective who was essentially demoted without any, as far as he could tell, real substantive reason. Even his supervisor, at the time Area 2 detective, the commander, named Rodney Blissett, couldn't offer an explanation, and we actually saw Blissett testify in this lawsuit recently. Essentially, Lambert is alleging that he was demoted as a form of retribution for being asked or pressured into altering documents over a police shooting. So it's a really, really big accusation, and it's something that is probably going to reverberate, and it's something that, really gets at this issue of, this sort of, rather than the idea of police misconduct being a few bad apples, the idea that there are these orders from on high that are sort of aiding this. I mean, if you think back to why the Laquan McDonald shooting got to the level that it did, it was not just because of one police officer who murdered a teenager, it was because of, this entire infrastructure and architecture that sort of closed ranks around him,
right,
and tried to change the story and do the cover-up.
Systemic issue. Yeah.
It's a systemic issue that we should note that Lambert, the plaintiff, is really trying to. He said his goal is really to force some kind of systemic change in the department to try to blot out this kind of code of silence or culture of trying to cover up anything that makes the police look bad.
Yeah.
We can probably, though, guess that this will more likely end up in a settlement, which is where a lot of these police misconduct cases go, and there's not necessarily any guarantee of systemic change.
Yeah, and before we take a quick break, another one for you, Alex. A CTA employee has been charged with stealing more than $350,000 from the agency's retirement fund. What's the scheme that they're alleging here?
So this is a former CTA clerk who was found indicted in federal court on wire fraud charges. She allegedly created dozens of false pension payment requests to basically try to fabricate employees who are looking for pension payouts. The upshot was that she basically robbed the CTA pension fund of more than $350,000. One, potential little consolation or bright spot in this is that apparently the CTA discovered this internally in like a routine audit, as opposed to some kind of outside probe, which indicates that maybe the agency is trying to sort of get its house in order. Another thing to remember is that an employee stealing from the pension fund is really just her stealing from herself and really her coworkers and all of the other employees writ large. The pensions are owed to all of the employees after their retirement. They have to be paid one way or another, and the CTA, just like the city and the state, is on this legally mandated ramp where every year employees are going to have to contribute a little more and a little more to their pension funds, and so any shortfall in that is just going to have to be paid by everyone else.
All right, we're going to pick up with the weekly news recap in just a moment with journalists Heather Cherone, Alex Nitkin, and Kate Grossman. But first, we'll check back in with Claire Lane for the latest headlines. There's a new lawsuit against Twitter. Back now with more Reset. I'm your host, Sasha-Ann Simons. If you're just tuning in, it's our weekly news recap where we make sense of the week's top local and state stories. Now, before the break, we took a close look at the mayoral race, but there's much more to get to.
Governor Pritzker was not advocating for Illinois to join other states who allow for consumers to order online and have their weed delivered like pizza, but today he said he supports the idea.
Uber Eats has reached a settlement with the city of Chicago to repay restaurants millions of dollars over alleged violations during the pandemic.
An elite private school in Chicago is facing online criticism after a dean was apparently recorded by a right-wing activist group talking about the school's sex ed programming.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker signing off on amendments to the Safety Act before it goes into effect on January 1st.
Our panel today is WTTW Channel 11 Chicago politics reporter Heather Cherone, Alex Nitkin, a reporter for the Illinois Answers Project at the Better Government Association, and Kate Grossman, senior education editor for WBEZ. A reminder that we are online right now on WBEZ's YouTube page, so feel free to comment or leave a question, talk to us in the YouTube chat, and I may just read what you have to say about these news stories on the air. All right, over to you first, Heather. Governor Pritzker signed the amendment to the criminal justice package, which is known as the Safety Act. How does the amendment actually change this bill?
Well, it does not change it significantly, although it does seek to sort of tie up some loose ends that were, of course, a major issue in the November election. And one of the things it does is that it gives judges more ability to hold people in jail whom they think either have, are likely to have committed a very serious violent crime or pose a direct threat not only to an individual but the community. And it also makes it clear that people who are in jail on December 31st will not be released on January 1st when the new law goes into effect, that essentially everyone in jail can sort of reapply to get out on bail if they are, if they want to and if they are eligible for it, but that there's not going to be any sort of massive release, which is, I think, part of what the misinformation was that was so much at issue during the election. But even though this bill has now been signed into law by Governor Pritzker, it's not the final word on whether it will go into effect. There is a court hearing set for December 20th. A number of state attorneys from around the state have sued to stop its implementation. So we won't know for at least another 10 days or so about whether the law will change on January 1st as part of really a concerted effort by Democrats in the General Assembly to remake Illinois' criminal justice system in an attempt to reverse really just decades of systemic racism that they say have done nothing to make cities and towns and villages safer.
Now, in other news, Alex, the city of Chicago has reached a settlement with Uber Eats. This is over deceptive practices. These food delivery apps, they became even more popular during the pandemic. So talk about the details of this settlement here.
Yeah, this all dates back to an ordinance that the city council passed in 2020, sort of at the depths of the pandemic, that was really trying to crack down on the sort of gouging of delivery fees, of commission fees by these third-party delivery apps like Postmates. And a lot of restaurants were really complaining, saying, hey, we're really reliant on these third-party apps, and they're charging us these 20, 30, 40% commissions and making it much harder to do business. And so the city council passed an ordinance setting a 15% cap on those commissions. The city then came back and sued, saying, hey, you've just been ignoring the rules and charging whatever commissions you want anyway. And so this is a $10 million settlement that Uber Eats and Postmates have agreed to pay. $8.5 million of that is going to the restaurants. The rest goes to the city. And yeah, I think it just goes to show the really delicate and complicated relationship the restaurants have with these apps that are definitely not going away. And we'll have to see how they behave and how much more they become part of the sort of restaurant fixture, especially after they've been caught doing this.
How they behave, yeah, for sure. Well, the state might be opening the door to another kind of delivery service very soon, Alex. On Wednesday, the governor had this to say about the idea of whether marijuana could one day be delivered just like your favorite food.
At first blush and without the data in front of me, I think that as long as it is regulated, as long as we make sure that the person who's ordering it gets it and that they're legally allowed to, then it would seem to me like, the same as somebody coming into a store.
So other states are already doing this, Alex. You can probably, you can pretty much order anything you want from an app at this point. So do you think that we might soon see the equivalent of an Uber weed?
I think maybe. I think that it's sort of a natural progression now that, especially at long last, the first social equity applicants are finally actually opening, which is what the governor was sort of touting and celebrating there. The conversation was always going to be, okay, what's the next step in the legal regulation, deregulation process? Delivery was definitely one of those ideas that has come up, and I think that this was really the governor, if not necessarily endorsing, then acknowledging, like, yes, this is one idea that's out there that the state could run with. Another one is on-site consumption. This is something that the legislators who crafted that original legislation, I think, always wanted to get to at some point.
Yeah.
We're already starting to see some dispensaries sort of trying to get ahead of it by designing little like lounge spaces, like sort of weed bars where they are. I think that we're going to continue seeing these kinds of ideas develop until, with the ultimate goal of a legal marketplace that is saturated to the point where it outcompetes the black market, which we are a long way from that point right now.
Yeah.
Hey, Alex, can I ask? I wondered, do you know if in order to deliver weed, are there any legal hurdles or legislation that needs to be passed?
Oh, to be the delivery person?
Yeah, I just wondered if, the governor said he's open to it, but
it's a good question.
Do you know what are the are there any hurdles that Illinois would have to go through to make that happen? I'm just curious.
I think it would just have to build out a whole legal infrastructure through the Department of Professional and Financial and Professional Regulation, IDFPR. There are already a whole bunch of rules restricting how pot can be sold. It has to be in these dispensaries in specific spots with a whole lot of security, and so just a lot of rules are going to have to be written into it saying, here's how you can get a license for that, here's how they'd have to do it. And so it's just probably a lot of minutia, no single thing.
For sure. This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. We are going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap. That's Alex Nitkin, reporter for the Better Government Association, WTTW Channel 11 Chicago politics reporter Heather Cherone, and Kate Grossman, senior education editor for WBEZ. Over to you, Kate, because we're going to take a look at a story involving the Francis Parker School, right? That's an elite private school, right, in Lincoln Park. What's going on?
So the school is sort of facing a torrent of online harassment this week after a conservative group posted a video of the dean of students at the school. They've had to increase police presence, new security measures. And the video shows the dean of students describing a visit by an LGBTQ health organization to the school, an optional session for high schoolers about queer sexual health.
Uh-huh.
And the session included discussion of sex toys. So that's the heart of the controversy. But
and how old are these kids?
High schoolers.
Okay.
High schoolers. But the reason what's really important to know about this story is that this was a secretly recorded video of the dean who was at an education conference last week. And the school says that someone presented himself to the dean as another attendee at the conference and invited him to coffee and to have a conversation. And he secretly recorded him. And then they, put this video out. It's incredibly salacious. And the group that put this out, it's called Project Veritas. People may have heard of it. They're basically an online sting operation. They call themselves journalists, but
they're a conservative group.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't use journalism tactics. And they go after progressive organizations and news outlets. They went after NPR a couple of years ago. They've gone after the Washington Post and a bunch of other organizations. And they try to, expose them, shame them. And they're another reason why they're not journalists is they have a clear agenda. They're trying to take down, LGBTQ. But they have gotten a lot of play. The video has been seen nearly 5 million times.
Wow.
And it's circulating among all the right-wing folks with hashtag, expose groomers.
Oh, boy.
So, and they're using it to raise money. Now, there's a legitimate question to ask, like, is it appropriate to have sex toys in a high school session? That's a legitimate question, but this is they're not looking for a constructive conversation about what's the best way to do queer sexual health or to do queer sexual health at all in a school. So, it's important to note this is a private school. And so obviously if parents didn't want it, they presumably would make that known. So this is really a story more about online harassment that, could be a story about like what's the best way to deal with sex ed, but that's not really what this is about.
I mean, it sounds like this group is just reaching to kind of revive this very old, pernicious and sort of harmful myth trying to tie LGBT teachers to, grooming or pedophilia or something like that. It's really been weaponized in a pretty ugly way. And you can see that a group like this is just trying to, I think, deceptively try to move it in that direction.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. It's just, it's been rough for
it's
the
unfortunate.
school.
Yeah. Well, Heather, switching gears, the developer of Chicago's proposed casino, they held a community engagement meeting on Monday night. Did they reveal anything more to the River West residents about what the plans are?
Well, I think that the plans originally called for an outdoor music venue, which was very controversial because the casino is going to be right along the riverfront. And that could mean a lot of light pollution, noise pollution, and a lot of people that could harm what's a recovering but still fragile river ecosystem. So those plans have been dropped. They were really never formally part of the casino. It was just sort of, as part of the, renderings and schematics. So I think that is going to be something that River West residents appreciate. But we are still in a holding pattern. So the temporary casino is set to open in the Medina Temple at Ohio and Wabash this summer. And then the permanent casino isn't even slated to open until 2026. But we're still waiting for the Illinois Gaming Board to issue a license to Bally's to operate this casino. And until that happens, they can't really do anything. Yeah. So there's certainly no indication that the Gaming Board is, concerned or preparing to reject it or anything. But it is an indication that this is a very long, complicated process that, was never going to sort of be the type of, open door, begin playing slots and back and baccarat right away that I think a lot of people expected. And there are still a lot of questions about what impact both the temporary casino and the permanent casino is going to have on this area, with traffic and in terms of just changes to the fabric of what is a very residential area. More so the permanent casino than the temporary casino, but it will be a big change for both.
Yeah, our friend on YouTube, Shamrock Bloom, agrees, Heather. Shamrock says, not liking the idea of a casino in River West. Too much congestion and overbuilding, and gambling is typically viewed as a tax on lower income people.
I think that a big part of I think that a big part of the city's challenge here is to show how a casino is going to actually be integrated into the surroundings, into the neighborhood. This is something that has really been a part of their messaging, and especially some of the recent concessions that they've made, sort of linking to the Riverwalk and making it a natural part of the environment. But a casino really, almost by design, everywhere you look, is a kind of standalone, inward-facing kind of monolith. There are no windows. It's all very just a sort of standalone thing. So as you hear, and I'm going to be tuning into the Chicago Plan Commission on Monday is going to be talking about this sort of newest iteration of the design. We're probably going to hear them talking about how, it fits really well. It's a collection of experiences where the casino is just one. They're going to use landscape architect's favorite word, which is porous. It's going to be so porous. There are going to be people spilling in and out all the time. But I don't know, just a sort of inherent contradiction to think about.
Well, here's a follow-up question from Shamrock Bloom online. Heather, why do we need a temporary casino?
Oh, well, I first want to say that Alex took the words right out of my mouth, so thank you for doing that, Alex. And we need a temporary casino because the city needs this money right now, yesterday, 6 months ago. So all of the revenue that the city gets from the casino is earmarked to pay off its just massive pension debt. So every dollar that the city gets means that they won't have to spend that dollar on pension debt and can put it towards police services or mental health services or really anything else. So the city wants to get this casino and gambling up and running as soon as possible. And this is going to replace what is now the Chicago Tribune Freedom Center, which is where the paper is printed and where the Tribune has their offices and newsroom. So there is a lot of construction that needs to take place on what is now, essentially a warehouse to turn it into a destination with streets and sidewalks and grass and building. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. Well, another story here before we take a pause, Alex. A Chicago-based architect was awarded one of the highest honors in the profession. This is the gold medal from the American Institute of Architects. Her name's Carol Ross Barney. What are some of her more notable works in the city?
Carol Ross Barney has been really active. If you don't know her name, you probably know.
I've seen her work.
Yeah, you've seen her all over the place. I mean, she was the lead designer of the Chicago Riverwalk, which I think has, in the past 10 years, just become an instantly iconic Chicago space. She designed the Searle Visitor Center at Lincoln Park Zoo with these cool sort of like thatched overlapping platforms. She designed the CTA Morgan stop, the Pink Line and Green Line in Fulton Market, which opened about 10 years ago and has this sort of cool, blocky warehouse chic design matching the rest of the neighborhood. I got to say, where I personally draw the line, she also designed the replacement of the late lamented Rock and Roll McDonald's in River North, which a replacement I can personally only describe as, frankly, a smooth jazz McDonald's at best.
Smooth jazz.
It left a, giant guitar-sized hole in my heart, and I miss it.
I can't with you and the puns. We're going to take a quick pause here on the weekly news recap, and we'll be back in just a moment with Alex Nitkin of the Better Government Association, Kate Grossman of WBEZ, and WTTW's Heather Cherone. But first, Claire Lane's taking us back to the topic of gambling. Illinois bettors have set a record.
Yes.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. We are back with more of our weekly news recap, giving you a closer look at the week's top stories across Chicago and Illinois. Before the break, we got the latest on the casino plans for Chicago, but we've got more to get to. And still here with us, Chicago journalists Kate Grossman, Heather Cherone, and Alex Nitkin. We're still live right now on Facebook and YouTube for those of you who prefer to watch. So Kate, faculty at the University of Illinois at Chicago, they've announced a potential strike date. What's the latest?
So they authorized a strike last month, and they've set January 17th as a strike date.
Okay.
That's a week after classes begin, so it's very well timed to have students come back. Maximum disruption. which is no
maximum drama.
Right,
Yes.
no accident.
Absolutely.
Right. So I guess they've been without a contract since August. This is the faculty union, 900 members. The issues are about pay, workload, also about mental health. That faculty say that students, because of the pandemic, have had more mental health issues. They want more support for mental health for students and themselves. So we'll see. This is what happens, right? They feel like negotiations have been dragging on, and so they light the fire. And it's to the season. Northern Illinois faculty are also making a lot of noise about their contract. They sat in at the Board of Trustees meeting yesterday. We just hired a higher ed reporter, and we were talking about beat coverage this week. And I said, let's not turn into the labor relations higher ed reporter. We want to cover these things, but this stuff could end up being a full-time beat.
There's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, and this is a reflection. UIC, there was a faculty strike in 2014. This is a reflection of the underfunding, I think, of higher ed in Illinois that's been going on for decades, and there's been some recovery in the last couple years, but they're sort of nowhere near where they need to be, and so I think that's probably one of the core issues.
We'll be seeing more of this, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Over at the School of the Art Institute, there was an online petition. It was circulating to rescind an honorary degree, and it's happened. So, Kate, fill us in. We're talking about Ye here.
Yeah. So he didn't graduate from the School of Art Institute, but he's a Chicago guy. And so a couple of years ago, the School of Art Institute gave him an honorary degree. And then, as you said, there was this online petition to say, yank it.
Yep.
And obviously, as I'm sure everybody knows, this is just the latest yanking for Ye. There was Adidas, Gap, and the things he keeps doing, anti-Black, anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
The latest, he posted a anti-Semitic thing on Twitter. I guess his Twitter account now is suspended again.
Correct.
So this story interests me in part just because it's a reminder of his Chicago connections. Other people outside the rest of the country might forget, but folks here think of him as a Chicago guy.
Yeah, more than 4,000 signatures as of yesterday afternoon raised or signed for this thing. So, yeah, a lot of people wanted that to go, for sure. Chicago moved from low COVID risk to medium right after the Thanksgiving holidays. I don't know if there are plenty of surprises there, but what are you hearing from CPS, Kate, about the COVID situation in the classrooms? I will say I'm getting fewer emails lately about COVID outbreaks, which has been nice as the parent.
Yeah, I took a look right before I came on at the latest COVID numbers, and the COVID numbers in CPS in general, this is reported cases by students and faculty, and also, whatever testing happens. They've actually remained low and pretty consistently low all fall. There's a little bit of a spike last week, but not a huge one. I think on December 5th, there were 164 student cases in the whole school district.
Okay.
That's not to say there aren't more cases. Like, obviously not everybody reports them, but we're not in a crisis point by any means. But everybody is saying holidays are coming. We have flu, RSV, and COVID likely to surge. The school district is in their website at the Board of Education meeting. They're saying masks, even though they're not required, highly recommended. They're urging kids to get vaccinated. The vax rates remain quite low in CPS, particularly at certain schools.
Yeah, and while you're on that point, we want to make sure that everyone who's listening and watching us knows that tomorrow is actually the last day to get your flu and your COVID shots in order to have maximum protection over the Christmas holidays.
Good to
know. So very key date to keep in mind. If you're going to be traveling over the holidays, though, you might be passing through O'Hare. And guess what? It was just named one of the best airports in North America. That's according to Global Traveler magazine. What does everyone think of that? And I'm talking to you folks on YouTube, too. I want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly as far as your O'Hare experience. Heather? Any thoughts?
Well, I can attest personally. I flew through O'Hare to Alabama to visit my brother just last week and had a delightful experience in O'Hare. I even had the benefit of flying out of Terminal 3, which meant I got to have lunch at the delightful Rick Bayless restaurant there, and I did silently judge everybody in line for McDonald's and Popeyes when they have literally gourmet Mexican food at O'Hare.
I'm sure they were judging you too.
Exactly.
But it's clear that O'Hare is nearly back, if not completely back, from the pandemic-imposed sort of travel drop. It was busy. There were lots of people. There were not very many masks, which, I think can be really a source of concern sometimes. But it was very much business as usual at O'Hare. And I know that's really good news for the city because the city really gets just a massive amount of tax money and business, through the airport, and are glad to see it operating normally.
Well, Heather, I'm just glad that you're never there when I'm at Terminal 5 getting my Burger King. Alex, you made a face there. What do you think of O'Hare?
I have mixed feelings about O'Hare.
Best airport in North America?
I haven't been to every airport in North America. I've always really wanted to go to PDX, the famous Portland one, to compare that one, but supposedly everyone loves for some reason. But, my partner really prefers to fly out of Midway because it's just smaller and more convenient. I can appreciate that. I personally really like the just sort of grandiosity of O'Hare, especially those really big, beautiful concourses in Terminals 1 and 3 with all the flags. I think that the worst part about O'Hare for me is all the tarmac traffic and all the delay when you're sitting out there. There are just so many planes waiting to take off all the time, and it's always really busy. And also, a couple months ago, I flew out of Terminal 5, and hopefully this is temporary because they're just going through, some construction right now. But, man, it was bad. It was like being in a haunted house in more ways than one.
Our friend Angela online says, I have to say, I've never had an airport experience that I considered anything close to pleasant. Yeah, that's Angela, fair. I'm kind of right behind you. All right, we got to switch gears and turn to sports real quick before we run out of time because World Cup fever does continue. Even though the U.S. did get knocked out last weekend, there were still some celebrations all throughout this week in Hyde Park, and that's because the Maroons, that's the University of Chicago men's soccer team, they won their first Division III NCAA championship. And we talked earlier this week on Reset with Coach Julianne Sitch about that victory. Let's listen.
I think, for myself, honestly, as I'm getting choked up, it's just been very emotional. I never envisioned this at all. And I think this is just phenomenal for women across the board. I grew up watching men. I, from a very young age, wanted to be a professional athlete. And the people that filled my bedroom wall were men's soccer players until 1999 when the Women's World Cup and they won, and Brandi Chastain, the iconic, ripped her shirt off and, women's soccer blew up in the U.S. And, from that moment, it was where I could truly believe in my dreams to be a professional soccer player.
Yeah, very, very historic moment. She's a first-year coach and the first woman to win an NCAA men's soccer title. So congratulations again to the team and Coach Sitch. Before we go, Alex, I want to first give a shout out to the nearly 2,000 people representing 120 countries. They were sworn in as U.S. citizens at Wintrust Arena this week, and that's record-breaking because it's the largest citizenship ceremony ever in Chicago. Wow, here's Governor Pritzker.
Whatever your journey has been, whether you fled violence like my great-grandfather, whether you won the green card lottery, whether you came here for school or for a job or for a loved one, or whether this is the only country that you've ever known, I'm so very proud to stand beside you as your fellow citizen.
We shouldn't forget that migrants are still regularly being bussed here from the Texas border, Alex. We're getting close to 4,000 people now?
Yeah, I believe it's about 3,700 now that it's just been this drip, drip, drip coming up from Texas. And I thought that it was really interesting to see this contrast of the thing that I really took away from this gigantic ceremony, swearing-in ceremony at Wintrust Arena, is that here in Chicago, we're really trying to draw attention to and celebrate the fact that there are so many, immigrants who are choosing this place. That's why it's in this big public place and why the governor came, because here, we tend to, most of us see immigration as a real benefit, especially when the city is trying to add population as like a social, economic, cultural, and just a moral good. So it's just interesting to contrast that against these leaders from other states who think that they're, trying to make some kind of political point by like busing people who, by the way, are not undocumented, people who are asylum seekers and who are in the pipeline to become full legal residents. So it's also important to remember that of these 2,000 people who were made citizens, there are still almost 700,000 people waiting for citizenship, some for years. So these are the lucky few.
The backlog is real. We'll have to leave it there. That's the weekly news recap. My thanks to Alex Nitkin, reporter for the Illinois Answers Project at the Better Government Association, Heather Cherone of WTTW, and Kate Grossman, senior education editor for WBEZ. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sasha.